Okay, so for the next few weeks, I really wanted to talk to y'all about the topic on creating a culture of success for our teams and just kind of focus on culture. And I am pulling this completely from the podcast, the Ambition Coalition, which Melissa Eichenhorst and Rebecca Folks run. So I really urge you to go listen. It's a two-part podcast for this topic. Go listen to the podcast sometime in the next week or so, because I think sometimes hearing a perspective from several different people and sometimes just hearing the same perspective over and over helps it really sink in. So go listen to the podcast, and they actually have a workbook that goes along with the podcast, which is really cool. And I will drop that link for you in the comments if I can find, where did I put the workbook at? And then that way, as I'm talking, you can follow along with me. And if you are listening to this call and you're like, well, I need the workbook too, and you don't see the link to it, go to the Ambition Coalition on Instagram, and it's like the last 3 or 4 reels, and you can comment on the reel podcast and they will send you the link to the workbook. If you just look for the reel that she has over creating a culture of success. So I'm dropping it here in the comments. So in her podcast, she talks about 8 different elements that it takes to create this culture of success. And before she hops into talking about the 8 ingredients, so to say, she's talking about showing up in momentum, but also in the hard seasons. And so this leads into the first ingredient, which is integrity. And when you talk about integrity as a leader, the things that I think of, and I don't know about y'all, is, honesty and, doing what you say you would do and not lying and not cheating and just basically, being an overall good person. But what she's referring to here is a different definition of integrity. I think of it more like when you talk about the integrity of a rope or the integrity of, of a foundation. You're thinking about how strong something is and how lasting it is. And so this is kind of more, when I'm talking about integrity, kind of shift your thoughts to that versus thinking, oh, I'm a good person. Because I think sometimes people think, oh, I have integrity. They can't accept that they don't have integrity, but this is a different type of integrity that we're speaking of here. So this form of integrity is more, are you doing the things that you're asking your team to do? Are you showing up in your business, really showing up on a regular basis? And this is super important. And I was thinking about this, how this relates to culture, for an example of the Thursday night and the Sunday night calls. These are calls I really would love to be a big part of our culture because they're easy to plug and play people into. It's very duplicatable, and it gets people listening to testimonies, which is the kind of the foundation of our business. But I'm asking myself, am I showing up to every Thursday night and Sunday night call, or at least the majority of them? Or am I just showing up to the ones I'm talking on? And a lot of times I'm just showing up to the ones I'm talking on or the ones I know my team is talking on. And I was thinking that, let's think about 2 different scenarios here. Let's say every week we're asking our teams to plug into these calls, and you have a new member that just happens to see a post that you had scheduled on your team page to show up to the call, and they showed up to the call and you were not there. They got super pumped. They listened to a testimony. That just built this awesome belief in them, and they reach out to you and they're like, oh my gosh, wasn't tonight's call so great? But you weren't on that call. Now think about the other scenario. If you were on the call with them, think about how that creates a culture. If they know that you're there to all of these things you're inviting them on, and they reach out to you and they're like, oh my gosh, that testimony was so good on that call, and you're able to be like, I know, her story moved me to tears. Let's talk more about that. Think about the difference in that culture that creates, and how more likely people are to how now they're going to go invite their people to the call, and they're going to invite their people to the call, and we're going to max these calls out with lots of people, which just really builds that belief. So it is, I think sometimes little things like this, it's easy for us to think, oh, it's not that important that I'm there. It's not that big of a deal if I show up to this or not. if we are asking our teams to be there, it really is important if we want that solid core culture. So this is kind of an example of the integrity I'm talking about. Like, yes, you don't lack integrity as a human if you don't show up to the call, but you are kind of lacking some integrity as a leader if you're not showing up to the calls that you're asking your team to come to. So I loved, I was thinking through this as an example of what are some things that I'm asking my team to do that I'm not doing. And that's a big one. So what are some other things that you're asking your team to do on a regular basis? Like, is it, how is your social media presence? Is it what you want your teams to be? How is your daily IPA? Are you actually doing it behind the scenes when nobody's watching? Like, are you really doing those things that you want your teams to do? When you're leading, maybe you're leading the power hours. When you're asking your team to do things on the power hours, are you then doing that activity, or are you then doing something different? So make sure this type of integrity is there. And this is truly the foundation of your culture, because you cannot create a culture if you are not showing up. You just can't. And so this is the number one and by far the most important ingredient of creating that culture of success. So always make sure when you're checking back in and kind of doing a gut check to see where things are, that this is in alignment. So the second thing that they talked about was creating a culture of united vision, purpose, and belief. And this is something like vision casting is such a crucial piece of your role as a leader. And so making sure that you are vision casting, not just like once a year at New Year's, like it's super fun to do in the new year, like, ooh, yay, we're all into, into goal setting, but make sure this vision casting is something that is constantly happening and that you are pouring into people so that when your team lacks belief, they can always come back to you for that, and for you for that vision to see like, okay, like, where am I going? Like, do you believe this for your team as much as you do for yourself? Make sure that is super important. And make sure that y'all have a united purpose and belief. Like, I know I feel like overall our team's purpose and belief is to, help everyone have health and happiness. But are we talking about that purpose and belief enough? Like, is it something that's solidified? I know, like, a lot of times, like our family, when our kids were younger, we had like a family verse and a family mission, and so I think it's cool to do that with our team, to have a really like solid set, like this is our vision, our purpose, and our belief. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about today, I'm just going to hit 3 of the 8 today, and I'm going to break this into 3 weeks so that we can really kind of talk about it and digest it. But the third thing was the systems for duplication. And I really do feel like this is something that we're all starting to get so much better at than we were, several years ago. I have my website, JJ has her website. I know lots of us are using the same formats, which is great, so that people like can each plug into each other's. And I think they're all very similar. For our team, like that systems is that on the very front page of that website, I have the first 5 things you need to do right off the bat. And so that somebody new can come in and be like, hey, just direct them straight to here, and they know what to do, and it's easy. And this is where those calls are important to the system for our team, because I want them to like have something to invite somebody to immediately every single week, and so that they know that that is there. Another thing that's important with these systems is it's just that it's simple for people, that if somebody does not have a good uplines, that they cannot use the excuse, oh, I didn't sign under the right person, I don't know, I'm not successful because I'm lacking that. Like, we want this in place so that if you have somebody in your downline that does not have a solid sponsor, they're not lost. Like this, so this is what's important in keeping that integrity of your business solid, so that people don't slip through the cracks, because that is there for everybody. So maybe we need a system to make sure that everybody knows the system, like make sure they're seeing the website as soon as they're joined, or whatever that, if you have a different system for your team, making sure that they have access to that as soon as they join, even if they have a sponsor that isn't giving that to them. So these are kind of the first 3 things that I wanted to touch on today about creating this culture of success as we're moving into convention and we're getting into summertime. I think it's easy to kind of we ride the wave of convention, but summer is such an easy time for us to kind of set back and check out. We get out of the routine of life, we get out of the routine of things, and that is when, like in the beginning, I talked about showing up, not just in momentum, but when times are hard. But I also think it's really important, not when times are hard, but when times are easy to show up. Because I think sometimes we get into like the rhythm of things. And at least I know I'm super guilty of this. We get into the rhythm of things. I show up to the mandatory things I have to. And then I'm on summer mode, and then I'm not doing that simple daily activity because I'm out of that routine. So I want to make sure this summer we don't fall into that summer mode. Yes, enjoy your summer, enjoy your life, but we do want to make sure we're not losing that integrity and that strength and of the foundation of our business this summer. So